Hello, welcome to Wellington's Lunch and Learn session on returning to work following parental leave. One of New Zealand's key focuses is to promote women's careers in infrastructure, including career planning and addressing concerns for new mothers who have taken time out of their careers. A 2018 global survey of professional women undertaken by PwC found a number of startling statistics on the impact of women taking time out of their careers to have children. 42% of those surveyed felt nervous about the impact having children would have on their career. 48% of women recently returned to work from parental leave felt overlooked for promotions or special projects. 37% of new mothers did not take their full allocation of parental leave because they felt that it would negatively impact their career. These issues all directly contribute to the underrepresentation of women in the infrastructure sector, and in particular at senior levels, where they've taken time out and not come back with the same momentum. With increasing focus on diversity, these issues really need to be addressed. I'm Emma Baines, Chair of the Wellington WIN Chapter Committee. I'm also a mother of two and have returned to work this July at KPMG when my youngest child turned 1. I'll be facilitating today's panel discussion. The format of today's session is a short panel discussion between the 3 panelists you'll see on my right. This will be followed by a Q&A session where we'd like to invite you to ask questions that you have. So please feel free to use the chat pod available over Zoom. I'll now ask the rest of the panel to introduce themselves, starting with Tania.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Tania Williams. I'm a civil engineer and currently I work for Engineering New Zealand, which is the membership organisation for all engineers in New Zealand, similar to chartered accountants or the Law Society. And so I'm one of the general managers there. And more relevant to today is I'm a mother of 3. I have a daughter, Grace, who is 12, and a son, Jacob, who's 8, and my youngest is Amelia, and she's just turned 3. With Grace, I took 4 months off. With Jacob, due to ill health, I ended up taking 13 months off, and with Amelia, I took 6 months off.
Liz?
Great, thanks Emma. So I'm Elizabeth Mardell. I'm a director in Deloitte's corporate finance team, and I specialise in supporting public sector entities that are infrastructure intensive and thinking about their strategic investments. So I'm mother of Oliver. He is 16 months old, and I returned to work mid-level 4 lockdown this year, and that was after 10 months at home with him.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Priya.
Hi. Hi, I'm Priya. I work at a place called Morrison & Co. as their in-house counsel. I have 2 kids, 5 and 3, and 2 dogs who also count. So Morrison & Co. is a fund manager that manages private investment into infrastructure projects. So that my role is focused on reviewing documents like project deeds and shareholders agreements and things like that. So it's really transactions based.
Thank you. So as hopefully you can all see, we've got a broad range of experience here, with also children spanning a broad range of ages. So we have a good panel for different insights and different challenges that have been faced. So if we kick off the panel discussion, our first question today is, can you share an example of how you've maintained momentum in your career while navigating the commitments of a young family? I'll hand over to Priya to kick off.
Yeah, happy to start off with that question. So I work in a role that really requires people to be around almost full time for getting a process through from start to finish. It's really hard to do it in a part-time way, to hand it over between people. And it also, pre-COVID, required quite a bit of travel. So the way that I made it work is to have basically a huge village around me. I'm really lucky to have grandparents around. I also have the ability to afford paid help. So I have a nanny, for example. So the way that I made it work is to have as much help as possible, and to also, I guess, kind of relax my standards around what that help looks like, right? Because I guess everyone has their ideal of what their life might be like if they had perfect freedom, but the things that are important to me, I make sure are done, and everything else kind of falls by the wayside. So it's been a little bit of a personal journey, but also kind of accepting all the help that I can, which means that when I'm at work, I can be 100% focused on work. without worrying about dropping the ball.
Great. So perhaps I can talk about what momentum meant for me. So I got promoted to director 2 weeks before I went on parental leave in 2019. And what that really was a culmination of a long conversation with the leadership team and here at Deloitte over about 18 months. However, actually getting pregnant almost gave me a bit more momentum and drive to make sure it really happened. So in January of 2019, I said, right, now's my time. I really want to push play and move up into a higher leadership position in my team. Kind of got all my ducks in a row and said to my service line leader, I'd like to make this happen. And by the way, I'm going to have a baby in July. And, really positively as the response was, well, don't see that as a problem. We want to support you. We want you to be successful. So I was really transparent about what my plans were and worked through the process and did get promoted in that June. And what that meant is when I returned from parental leave, I sort of stepped into that role in earnest and was able to keep going really. And it was deliberate. I chose to do it when I did. When I was able to draw on the experiences and the work I was doing at that point in time. So I think it was able to trust that my employers had my back was really positive. But, I had to put myself out on a bit of a limb, and it was a bit of a brave conversation and a brave moment. But it did actually pay off, which I've been very grateful for.
Yeah, so I'd just like to reinforce both those points. First of all, I read an article very early on in my journey in motherhood, which was get help. It was a successful woman with a successful husband who was just saying, take all offers of help, and when needed, don't hesitate, to make your life work. To take, not only nannying things, but a gardener or a cleaner or what other things. So that has been a really important part, especially when my children were young, of the journey that we've been on, is just getting the help we needed at the time we needed it to make it work and not feel overwhelmed, or, as we've discussed, not wanting to feel like you're failing at everything all at the same time. As far as momentum, it has changed a lot. As I have the oldest children, my experience of 13 years ago was very different to my experience with Amelia 3 years ago. And what I would like to share in this keeping momentum is my experience of 3 years ago, and something that those of you on this call are more likely to experience, is the support of employers nowadays. I went for a job with Engineering New Zealand not knowing that I was pregnant, but by the time they offered me the job, I did know I was pregnant, and I was very upfront before they actually made a formal offer that, this is where I was at, this was my intention. They took me on anyway. And so I worked for them for 6 months, and then took 6 months off, and then came back, and they were so supportive through all that process. I couldn't have asked for better. So don't hesitate, like you've said, to keep going for what you want in your career while doing what you want in your family at the same time.
Great. Yeah, that was one of the points we talked about actually when we met beforehand, was the idea of not sort of leaning out before you've decided to, like, we had obviously all read the book, but before you'd actually even gone to the point of being pregnant and having kids. A lot of women, I think, go, let me set myself up for a role that might work around the family. But actually, I think today employers are much more open to having an arrangement that will work for you, especially if you're a resource that want to keep. Yeah,
totally agree with that. And it's also child dependent, right? So you might have the dream baby and you can actually have it all, or you might need to stop and reassess, but don't do it beforehand. You don't know. See how far you can go, and then if it doesn't work, I think, Tania, you did that, didn't you?
Yeah, so with Jacob, who was my second, he was quite unwell for his first year of life, and he's fine now, but I didn't want to hand him over to anyone. I wanted to be part of that, and my workplace at the time allowed me to take more time off to get him into better health before I returned to work. So I changed plans through that year multiple times, but they were very accommodating to that, and it was something that I really wanted to do, to be able to give Jacob that time.
Thank you. So our next question is, how can we best support our colleagues when they return to work following parental leave? Tania, do you want to lead it?
Yeah, so again, I've done this 3 times, and each time has been a little bit different, and I have learned more as much as the workplaces have learned more at the same time. The things that I would say, the things that I valued most about this latest return to work was the amount of positive feedback. What we also talked about and preparing for this is just how it can be, you can have a real drop in your confidence when you're returning to work, regardless of whether you only have a few months off or whether you have a few years off. You can start to doubt your abilities and during that time you've missed, or just baby brain, or whatever you want to say about, and to have people genuinely make an effort to compliment you and reassure you you're doing a great job from day one when you return is huge, and I really valued that, and my current workplace made a real effort to do that, and I thought that was wonderful. I think another really important thing is those that have been through this to role model, to see someone that's returning to work struggling, and to go up and talk to them about what they're struggling with and what experiences you've had, and to really leave when you need to go pick up the kids, and make it loud. Don't leave quietly, leave loudly that you're going to pick up the kids, or a sick kid, or you're staying home, or like I was doing yesterday, seriously, on a preparation for a webinar, hiding in my wardrobe so my sick child couldn't find me and destroy things, but being very open that it's what I was doing. I think it's really important to put yourself out there and say that this is okay. And the last bit I had here is, just for those of you who haven't had children or are not going to, just to be really understanding, because it is and can be very challenging. It's very rewarding, absolutely, but it can also be challenging to balance the two. So that was my thoughts on it.
The other thing I found really useful actually when I was on parental leave was the opportunity to stay in touch if I wanted to. So there was no obligation to check in or to even look at my emails. But for example, I was invited to attend the annual strategy day, which I found really helpful. And I brought my baby along actually for the first one, which I found really helpful, because actually when you've got the space and you've been off work for a few months thinking about strategy, that's kind of the best time to do it, right? Because you've had that distance. You don't need to have been there last week and have read those emails to be able to input helpfully, but also it allowed me to meet my colleagues because they were all there in person for it, and just to sort of feel still connected to the business in a really kind of, in a way that it didn't require a lot of commitment from me. So I felt that was really helpful, and I'm kind of glad they did it, and as an idea I think that a lot of other employers could use. The other thing I'd say is to be aware that in that first year you're going to be sick a lot. So kind of be prepared for that, right? Because as soon as you put your child in daycare, like those daycare bugs are vicious and your immune system is not ready for that. So going back to having that support, but also just being cognizant that the person who's returning to work is not going to likely be able to be at the office on every day that they plan to be, at the hours they plan to be, and to be flexible around that. Yeah, thanks, Brad.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important to keep that in mind, because yes, as you say, there's a few things roll through your household over the first few years as your kids get exposed to new locations. I think I just reiterate a lot of what Tania said around that, the role modelling, the being understanding, being kind to the pressures that people are under, because you as much as people can warn you what your life is going to be like once you've had children, you have to go through it to really understand what that's going to look like for you as a family, because it's so unique to each family unit. So yeah, but I think just making sure you understand your colleagues' boundaries and where they have flexibility and where they don't, I think is another thing just to keep in mind about how they can contribute to the team, and where they've really got a hard deadline, they have to be gone for the day.
Yeah, we're not leaving our children on the side of the road outside the daycare.
Yeah. Not today.
Cool. Thank you. So next question. Some parents return to work part-time with part-time hours. What are some tips or tricks to keep in mind to adjust to a different way of working? Liz?
Yeah, so I'm actually the only one here that's not working full-time hours at the moment. When I returned to work, I returned 0.6, so it was 3 days, and in my mind I was going to work Mondays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. I did return during lockdown, so things were a little bit more flexible. And what I ended up actually doing, and this rolled in once we were allowed to return to the office, was doing 0.6 effort across 4 days. So what that looked like for me was starting at 9 o'clock and leaving the office at about 2:33ish, so that I could wait for my care to arrive and then be home to rolling into dinner time and things like that. From October, I moved up to 0.7, and so that's still it's 3.5 days across 4. So I've still got 2 shorter days and 2 full days. I have found working the longer days to be really beneficial. You get a bit more momentum in the day. And that's sort of something I learned about my own working habits through working 0.6 and 4 short days, is I really had to change how I did things, because I actually found I thought about my problems a lot for the morning and actually executed a lot of my work in the afternoons. And when you're leaving at 3, that doesn't leave a lot of time to get your work done. So it was just an interesting check on the way I work. And I think I've probably learned and become better from, that insight of myself. And I think I've got also better at using other people. So, it has driven me to become empower my team more to do more of my work. So that's probably, again, making me a better director and leader of the teams I'm running. And I think I sort of had some good advice as well, when you are under compressed time and make your meetings punchy. Can you do a half-hour team get together in a 15-minute stand-up and just kind of try and use your time? And I think the last tip, and Emma, I know you do this too, is sometimes on my drive home, I'll do my check-in calls with my team. How'd you get on? How'd you progress something? Ones that don't actually require something to be written down or presented as such. It's, using my time as effectively as I can. Yeah.
Definitely using the commute time saves it from being kind of dead time and clearing emails on the train, or which I think a lot of people do anyway. But when you're leaving at 3, it makes it kind of more relevant. Do you have any comments? I know you don't work full time, but do you have any experiences with other?
I do.
people
I
in
mean,
your
I've seen
team who
other
do?
women come back to work part time, and I think a couple of things that have helped them. One is for their teams to find meaningful work for them to do. I think there's a real risk that when you are the only part timer in a team, you're kind of being given admin-y tasks, which also doesn't help someone's career, for example. So I think if you're managing someone who's going back to parental leave, trying to find a way that they can actually contribute in a meaningful way is important. The other thing I was thinking about was, take a look at my notes, that there are like heaps more ideas now, including the point about those end of day calls around job sharing. So lots of people that I've heard of in other industries, for example, where there are 2 people working part-time, they share that job. So it is being covered on a full-time basis, but they have like 1 day a week where they overlap. And actually, it's great that there are those flexible options available. So you don't have to necessarily think that being part-time means you can't get the benefit of the full-time experience. Yeah.
The only thing that I would add, and it's as much for part-time as full-time and being a parent, is know your boundaries and make them widely known. Like, we're very conscious to do only all of staff meetings between 9 and 2:30, so that people that are working, and there are some days we avoid when our part-time staff mostly aren't working, like Fridays, and things. So it's just being a really conscious workplace, knowing your own boundaries, making sure that people are aware of those boundaries when you need to not be there or when not working. And also, we've added a footer to our emails that says, this is the time I'm choosing to work. And I know a lot of companies are going to this. You please don't feel a compulsion to answer it right now. Please just hold it until your time of working, and just little courtesies like that to make it really clear that it's okay not to jump on every email when it comes, or and have those boundaries in place.
Yeah, great point. They lead quite nicely into our first question from the floor. So please remember that you can use the Q&A pod on Zoom to ask some questions. We will run out quite quickly if you don't ask something, so please do. But our first question is, do you think the successful working from home during COVID will have a positive impact on women's abilities to return to work sooner or in a different, more flexible capacity?
I think definitely. One thing that's been really noticeable in our organisation is the use of technology. So whereas in the past, it hasn't been that great on video conferences and calls, for example, where everyone's around, a speaker, but shuffling papers and you're the person on the call and you can't hear half of what's said. Now that, especially during lockdown, when everyone was in front of their screen and everyone had their kids screaming in the background, it was a bit of a level footing. But we discovered that it worked. The teams were still keeping in touch, work was still happening. So I think that was a real kind of eye-opener, that actually having people from home isn't a deal killer in terms of productivity. So I'm hopeful that actually that there's going to be a lasting positive impact.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it is role dependent, because obviously as an engineer, there are site work and things. So working from home full time may not be possible with some professions and some roles. But I do think we advanced a lot more quickly than we would have without COVID. It's one of the few positives of this year that we have got much better at communication and different ways of doing that, and the clarity and the acceptance of that. So I think overall it will absolutely help in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think builds a business case of trust as well. And that, you know, clearly we all had to trust each other that we were still going to continue to work. And yes, look, we're still, a lot of us, able to be very productive at home. And yeah, some roles actually, when you get that time away from your desk and you get space to think, you know, you can actually get a lot more done. So I believe it's, positive shift. And that you might be able to, spend some more time at home and, get things done.
Okay. Next question. What are some formal and informal support networks you've accessed to navigate your return to work?
Oh, I'm happy to, do you want to go with that one first, or?
No, go
for it again. So what did I do? I made sure I spoke to women who had gone through parental leave in our organisation to kind of understand their experience and any kind of pitfalls that they had encountered. So kind of sharing and benefiting from that learning. I also am lucky that I've kind of worked, I've been with the firm for 6 years, so I've worked with lots of people at different levels of the organisation and built personal relationships, which now we catch up on an informal basis that is not project related or work related. It's just how is your career going type discussions. And I found those to be really helpful as well. Particularly, I work in finance, so it's really male dominated, and I found it useful to have a senior male person in the organisation talk to me about how to navigate various things about what I'm finding at work. So actually having that sponsorship has been really useful for me. If you can find that, actually, I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, for me, when I actually went on parental leave, there were 2 others in my team that went on leave at the same time, which would have been an interesting workload issue for the partners to navigate, but you know, got through. And so being able to, both of those colleagues who were going on leave at the same time already had children, older children, so it's just really cool to be able to bounce ideas and how they managed to navigate returning or taking the leave, how much they kept in touch, and then when they actually returned. And I reiterate, just talking to senior people, asking them sort of for advice, and I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, so all the work ones, the mentors, informal mentors, advocates, all your direct manager, all that sort of more formal, but just stressing the informal that we talked about earlier. It's really important to use your family, your friends, the other parents at daycare or school. We had a retired couple next to us when there was an emergency, where both of us couldn't make it and it just wasn't possible, that they would step in and help with the children and things. So there's all sorts of people that, if asked, are more than willing to assist and will absolutely love helping you out. So it is about looking around at all the options you have. They're not going to think it's a burden or a drain. They'll be honest about what they're happy to help with, but it takes a village, and you'll be surprised at how many offers of help you will get from various places.
And a small plug for WIN. I personally became the chair of WIN while I was on maternity leave, so that happened earlier this year. And just being involved with the committee and organising events like this meant that I kept in touch with people in similar situations who've been through this before, and that really helped me. It's always great to have a chat about what you're struggling with and what issues are out there, and solve the problems of the world, over a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah, and hearing how other people do things, it gives, more imagination when you're stuck in your rut about a child that doesn't sleep or whatever your challenges are that day. It's good to be able.
And the other source of kind of wisdom, I guess, or kind of support that I found is actually there's lots of information out there, right? Like, we're not recreating a wheel here. So I, for example, in the past couple of years have discovered a wealth of podcasts in the world, but I particularly like the ones that are focused on women and careers, because I find them really helpful and just sort of like different perspectives in a really easy, like on the drive to work type format. So I've never been a self-help book kind of person, but the podcasts have been really useful.
Great, thanks. So the next one we haven't discussed this yet, so I don't know what the answers could be, but we've got, what were your experiences of breastfeeding when returning to work? And do you think more work needs to be done in this space regarding supporting women who want to continue breastfeeding but don't want to express, e.g. visiting baby in daycare? So I don't personally know what your experiences were.
Yeah, I'm happy to lead up on that. I had a child that stopped taking a bottle at 9 weeks old. So that was a little bit terrifying at the time, made me feel quite claustrophobic, because that meant it was just all on me for, as far as I could see. By the time I returned to work, I was actually on the ramp down. So Oliver was 9 months old. He was starting to eat solid food, and I basically made it work. So, and that was part of my rationale for working 4 days, shorter days. So I'd feed him before I left the house at about 8:30, and then I'd feed him again at 3 o'clock when I returned home. So he wasn't fed over those 6 hours, but he cooked, I cooked. I think there's a bit of a challenge if it's a bit earlier in their life and they're being fed more regularly. I've never had any experience of sort of popping home or to meet up with him as and when he needed it. So there'd be different challenges for younger babies and if you're returning to work younger. But for us, and I think every person's and your relationship with your baby, everyone is different. So for us, I was able to continue and only stopped a month ago breastfeeding, and that was driven by me rather than him. I was done.
So I had a similar experience with my last child, Amelia. So she decided from very early on that she was not going to take a bottle, and no self-help book or mother's forum or anything was going to. So when I returned to work at 6 months, my husband was off with her, and he would bring her in each lunchtime. So I would feed her before I left. He would bring her in, and I would feed her at lunchtime, and then I'd feed her immediately when I got home. And you make it work. People at work were surprisingly understanding. They liked seeing Amelia come in each lunchtime. All I would say to that is you can make anything work. Just don't put barriers up that don't need to be there. I was quite worried about it, but once I relaxed into it, it was fine.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, it's a journey over time. It doesn't stay the same for very long. So you'd be able to just keep reassessing what's working, what's not, and the baby's needs change regularly. Yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, I was back to work kind of full time, 6 months for the first one, 8 months for the second one, and had stopped breastfeeding by then, so I didn't have to do the challenge of trying to get home or back or pump. But we have had women at work who have pumped during the day, and they've had partners come in and pick up the milk, so they don't have to keep it in a fridge, for example, all day, and that's worked. But yeah, there's definitely, I guess, work to be done. It would be helpful if you had a local creche, right? If you had a creche in the building or nearby where you could reach the baby, but it's a bit more difficult if you go across town. Yeah, especially if you're working shorter hours as well. Yeah.
Well, it is being honest with your employer too. So I didn't pump, but we in our wellness room, which is is completely private, have a fridge so that mothers can keep it there if they choose to. So we did that with that express purpose in mind.
Yeah, I think office design or workplace, not just office, but workplace design probably could do with some improvement. I mean, I know for some of the people in our organisation, they end up in meeting rooms that are half glass, or storage cupboards, for example. So yeah, really thinking about the wellness room idea sounds great, and also having it set up as well for milk is ideal. Okay. So thank you. The next question we've got is, were you always certain that you would return to work? How did you navigate the decision, and how you thought you would return? So whether you thought you would return with part-time or full-time hours.
Yeah, yes, yeah. So I had Oliver when I was 35 years old, and I've been working for 12 years, and my career is a big part of my identity, and so I always assumed I was going to return to work. I actually thought I might return sooner, but it is an interesting paradigm shift when you have children and the different calls on your time. So for me, it was always, yes, was planning to return. But actually, the advice I'd been given before I went on leave was to make sure you consider taking I signalled I was going to take 12 months parental leave. And then it was sort of added bonus to my team if I did return sooner. And then I'm still really keen to be doing more in terms of working. I'd love to be back at full time, but it is that pull for me to be influencing Oliver at this stage in his life. Therefore, I'm choosing to work a bit less. And that's my choice at the moment. But I've got, drives and ambitions of my own that makes, I do actually want to be in two places at once. I'd love to be working a full-time week and being able to look after him and be part of his formative time. So yeah, it's a pull, but I think for me it was always quite clear that yes, I did want to return.
Yeah, so for me, I had my first child, and you can all do the maths at 36. And so, I was always going to come back. But the best advice I got, and the best advice that I give, is you're not going to know how you're going to feel as a parent until you become a parent. So keep your options open, like keep your career at full speed as you have right up to the day you leave. And then once you've been a parent, give yourself the option of the 12 months, if you decide you want it. And during that 12 months, you can choose to stay longer. That's not a barrier either. Yeah, I would just say you really don't know. You might have an idea, but you really don't know until you've had a child how you're going to feel about returning to work. And people make different decisions. So just keep your options open in both home and work. My advice.
Yeah, I would also echo those thoughts, and I'd also say kind of do what feels right to you. If it feels right to you to return to work full time, then make your peace with that, because I think actually the world isn't set up in a way that supports mums at work in the same way it doesn't expect dads to be at home still, even though it's 2020. And so you will get a lot of kind of reinforcement of that idea, whether it's daycare, for example, calling you even though they know that your partner's at home to pick up a sick child, or asking you to pick up milk on the way home even though they know you're, all that kind of stuff. The world is sort of set up in a way that reinforces women should be at home, and so every time you do something that feels negative to that, you feel like maybe you're not doing that role correctly, or you're not being a mum the way that you should be. And I think you've just got to put all that stuff behind you. Decide that you're working because you like it, because it fulfills you, because you're ambitious, because you like the money, whatever reason it is. Because I think if you're constantly living in this world of I just feel so much mummy guilt about being at work, you're going to be not happy at home, and you're going to be not happy at work, and that's not a good place to be. So I think you've just got to kind of decide that's what you're doing, that you see benefit in working, and reinforce that for yourself. So I feel like there's a real mental health kind of impact on women who are constantly feeling like they are not living up to either standard, which is totally unfair and kind of crazy that it's still the world that we live in today.
Yeah. And that we've all felt that.
Yeah, we've all felt that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most common refrains is I'm failing both at work and at home. How is this possible?
Yeah.
Because you're setting unreasonable expectations for yourself.
Exactly.
And just a footnote to that is that no one else may see that. You might feel that, but you'd be surprised that at home and at work, people can see you as succeeding and flourishing.
Yeah. Superwoman.
Yeah, be kind to yourself. Yeah.
Great. This is potentially particularly for Tania. So for engineers who can't see any women that have had children in their business, what would be some advice for them to navigate this with their employer?
Yes, I've been there. You will in your workplace have men that are fathers. Maybe not all of them, but they will understand. They've had wives that have dealt with the same thing. So even in a male-dominated organisation, you will have people that will completely identify with where you are, will understand. Please just trust them and have those same conversations. And remember that you are a role model to others in your organisation by doing that. But in nowadays, even in male-dominated industries and organisations, the understanding level and what what is expected and how it will all work is much further ahead than it ever was, and take advantage of that, and don't be afraid of talking to your boss or whoever the appropriate person is about that.
I think a classic example as well is that, a lot of men are now choosing to take parental leave.
Yeah.
So it's no longer just a women's issue.
No.
And so male-dominated organisations are still going to hopefully start to see that coming through.
Absolutely. And most employers of engineers, and that's consultancies, contractors, and asset owning organisations, most of them would be, are very understanding. The ones that I'm aware of, both big, medium, and small. So I think whichever place you're working in will be very understanding to this issue.
Priya, I've got a particular one for you. Podcasts sound great. Which ones do you recommend?
I was like, as soon as I said that, I thought I want to get asked to recommend something. So the one that I'm listening to a lot at the moment is the HBR Women at Work podcast, which I've only just recently discovered because I was listening just to the HBR ones. But yeah, there's a specific Women at Work one, which has got like 5 seasons. So I'm working through the back catalogue on that. There's one called The Fix by Michelle King, who it's actually a book that she's written. She's an Australian, and her premise is that it's not women that are broken, it's organizations that are broken. And actually the problem when you don't name and identify that is that women internalize it and they go, oh, I didn't get invited to that meeting, it must have been something I did. I'm not being present enough, I'm not speaking up enough. Oh, they didn't copy me on that email, it must be my fault. Like, actually it's not, it's the organization, and it's the way that the organization set up. So she and her podcast talks to people kind of generally around that theme and around what you might do to kind of increase women in leadership and things like that. So those are the 2 at the moment that are at the top of my list.
Either of you on the podcast buzz, or will you be logging into Priya's suggestion?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I'm going to go.
I listened to a fantastic interview. I think it was Women Who Move Nations, and it was a Australian public transport. I think it's UITP. And they interviewed Nicole Rosie from Waka Kotahi, and she shared her journey. I think that sort of interview approach, that was one that I listened to, and I found that really informative. She has 4 children, and has clearly had a very successful career. So I think kind of keeping an ear out for things like that, interviews with successful people, is a good option too.
Great. Thank you. Next question. What is your advice to women who feel they've been overlooked for promotional projects while on leave, or feel like they've been put on the back burner when they've returned to work?
I'll start, but I believe in most workplaces this wouldn't happen so much now, but it did happen in the past. And the advice there was, again, be open and honest. In the past, people might have thought they were doing you a favour by not putting pressure on you, by giving you work that was slightly easier because they perceive that's what you would like so that it works better with your family and things. I think if you're honest and be clear that that's not what you want, and you want that challenge, and you jump in and offer to be part of that job or things, I'd be very surprised if that isn't taken really positively. I think that kind of unconscious bias, oh, they've got young kids at home, this will be easier, they'll want this, when it may not be what you want. So I would say always in this situation, question it, speak up in a really positive sense, express what your career ambitions are, what you want to get out of this role, the type of work you'd like to be involved in, that, just be really front foot this kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and be your communication and how you can actually work and what you can give, and to add value into your projects or into the culture of the team.
Yeah, I think so much depends on your manager, right? Your direct manager is like in control of how well or not well your career progresses. So I think if you feel like you're not going to get anywhere with that conversation, you've got to recognize that pretty early on and try and work out what you can do about that, whether it's a shift in teams, a shift in organizations, because I think if you've got a manager who just can't see a working mum as being a effective member or productive member of their team, it's really hard to shift that mindset, I think.
Yeah, and probably the two-way communication, it may not have been a situation the manager has navigated before, and so they just don't really know.
Mm,
So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
sharing what your expectations are, can help from that perspective.
I mean, it's been a common theme through all of the points that we've talked about today. It's communicating where you're at, what your needs are, what you want to get out of it, and making sure that it's two-way dialogue between you and your employer, right?
Yeah, and like I said before, those needs change over time, and at the moment I know what it's like to be navigating a 16-month-old, and I'm sure Tania has much different challenges with navigating the 3 to 13. They've got different needs from you. And
yeah, my son just started school 2 weeks ago, so like as soon as we have the daycare routine down, now we're doing 3 o'clock pickups, so it's sort of always changing.
Yes. Constant with children is the change, right?
Yeah.
Next one. How would you deal with the situation if at present you want to focus more on family and work part-time, but in future, once your children have gone to school, for example, you'd like to move higher in your career?
I don't see those things as being mutually exclusive. Yeah, and I'd hope that they aren't actually. I think you should feel confident that you can work part-time and you can prioritize. Everyone wants to prioritize their family, let's be honest. Nobody just wants to be only the employee and have nothing else outside of work if they can help it, right? Whether it's family, whether it's a hobby, whether it's sport, whatever it is. So everyone wants, I think, to be comfortable that they can bring their whole self to work. Just so happens that your whole self also includes your role as being a mother. So yeah, I would hope that your employer can see that and can recognize that even though you're part-time now, you're still climbing the ladder. You're not just sort of stuck in a spot.
I agree.
And if people want to take longer times, I have friends who have taken 5 or 10 years off and then restarted into very successful careers. One of the people at my organisation, I won't mention her by name, but she took 10 years off, had 2 children, came back, was quite worried about it, but has been back 4 years, done a great job, and is just in the process of leaving us to take a promotion into another one. So you can can successfully navigate that. A lot of that, and I'm sure she didn't mind me saying, is confidence. It's just trying to do your best to keep up with new technologies and legislation and challenges and that type of thing is really important, not every day, but just in general. And then, just being really honest about when you're going back, but also being honest with yourself and your employer about where you want to be when you make that choice to come back.
Yeah, like the promotion to director right before mat leave, right?
Yeah, I think acknowledge your value. Know the pace you want to work at. You can't do everything, and acknowledge that you might have to slow down on a few things. But, I think knowing your value and what you bring to the team and why you're there is really important.
And knowing that it is possible, even with long breaks, to come back and be successful. That's not, you don't have to retrain, become something else. If you want to, that's fine, but it is possible to go back into your chosen career after a reasonable break and still be successful going forward.
Great. Coming back to the communication point, the next question we've got is, in terms of making a plan with your employer, for example, if you're the only one who does your role and you'll need temp cover, so you'll need someone to actually come in and cover your role, what advice do you have on when to start talking to your employer about that and telling them that you're planning to take parental leave?
I started pretty early. So I started as soon as I was telling people, I think it was the 12-week mark that I was telling people that I was pregnant. I started then because I knew it was going to be hard, but we ended up getting a secondee in for me for the first time, who ended up becoming permanent. And then for the second time, we got a contractor. But like it was always going to be hard to find this specific kind of skill set, a lawyer that had M&A experience that could also work in-house, that was available in this time zone, all those things. And we've had trouble hiring in the past, so I was aware of the fact that it was going to be a process to find someone, and so I was upfront early on that I was pregnant, yay, let's find someone. And my manager at the time had 3 children and was actually really excited about it, and was really supportive.
Yeah, sort of similar time frame, I think 13, 14 weeks. Told my Deloitte colleagues first, and the first response was congratulations, and then progressively told my clients. I think some of them I may have not said till I saw them in person, so 16, 20 weeks, and it becomes a little bit more obvious that it's the case by then. And I think in terms of my transition to when I was heading up to leave, it was really identifying who was going to be taking over my role on a specific project, how long that project had left to run, and doing a bit of a handover. They shadowed me for a few weeks leading up to when I actually and I started to step back as well over the 4 weeks leading up to when I was going on leave. I ended up having 5 weeks leave before Oliver turned up, which last 10 days were quite tedious. It wasn't planned to be that long. And I actually sort of kept in touch loosely with the project teams, just if there was any, just to help troubleshoot. Yeah. But once baby arrived, it was that I just was not available because life is busy in those first few weeks.
So that is a really personal choice.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're all in a position of having an employer who will be understanding and supportive and things. In my case, I got terrible morning sickness, so there wasn't an option not to tell any of my employers, quite early on, and because otherwise they would think there was something terribly wrong with me. But different people do it at different times, and that is a personal choice that you need to make based on your employer and how you feel about it, and what feels right to you. I don't think there is one answer for that. And your employer, it's their responsibility to find a replacement, and absolutely, if you can help with that, that's great. But this happens. People are doing this all the time. We are currently looking for 2 maternity covers in my workplace at the moment. Workplace is 70 people, so and that's fine. That's our responsibility, and there's no issue with that. And they are both the only people that do their role, and both have quite specialist skills. So it is going to be difficult to replace both of them, but that's part of being in business.
Thank you. So another one we've got is, and it's not directly linked to returning to work after maternity leave, but part of the journey. Do you have any suggestions for what organisations should do for women who are having difficulties getting pregnant or might need to be accommodated during that journey of getting pregnant and maybe not so successfully getting pregnant?
I will answer this because I had full disclosure, huge infertility issues, and it took me 4 years, and I had 3 miscarriages before my first child, and many interventions, more than anybody on here want to know. But I don't know the right answer. I would just go back to the communication of, you won't want to tell everybody because you really, but please have someone in your workplace that you can confide in the journey and the difficulty that you are going through with that, so that they can help you to navigate getting leave for different reasons and that sort of thing, and will be understanding and will cover for you when you don't want the entire office to know what that's for. So yeah, it is about communication, but in that case it's about finding someone that you trust to support you in the workplace through that journey, which can be really hard.
Yeah, so it's a fraught time of life, and the story that you get told as a 15-year-old, which may actually be the case when you're 15, is a lot different when you're are in your 30s or whatever age you choose to start your family. Yeah, I've been pregnant 3 times and I have 1 baby, and it's tough to navigate the disappointment of a miscarriage, and my workplace has been really good and given me the space I needed and been able to take time off at times, just to the 2 times it's happened, to be able to process what's happening, because it's so much out of your control. Yeah,
and I think it's a communication not just with your employer but also with your wider networks, because these challenges are way more common than people think, and need to be talked about, because they're happening every day to people we know, and we may not be aware of it.
Yeah, you can see here.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is, what would you consider mum-friendly in terms of good workplace design? So I think this is in the physical sense. What would be beneficial to working mums within an office space? So, daycare?
Can we have one of those, please, on the ground floor? That would be perfect. That's an interesting question. I guess it hasn't really impacted me because I drive to work, for example, and I can park reasonably close to my office, so I can get to my car reasonably quickly. I think we talked about this at our coffee session. So you can get to daycare quickly if you needed to, or to school. So actually, I guess even like everyone's wish list, right? Better public transport links, because then I wouldn't necessarily have to drive my car, and I could just get my kids to school, then hop on a train or a bus and get to work on time. The bus that goes past my school at 8:45 takes 45 minutes to get to the city from Naya, which is like out of control. So it's not really an employer issue. I think for me, the transport would be the big one, which is more of a government issue.
Infrastructure issue.
Yeah.
I think spaces to take personal phone calls.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us work in open plan offices, and there's been times I've sort of nipped into someone's office while they're there, and I'm hoping they don't come back while I'm having a phone call, and whether that's sort of personal appointment side of things, or just trying to not have to have the conversation about your children across the entire office. So that would be a small intervention that might be useful.
And the wellness room that we talked about earlier, our wellness room, we have a wellness room, and then we have a meeting room next door that can be used for the same purpose in case someone's already in there. But they have the privacy, like they have glass doors, but they have all the frosting over it. They're a comfortable space. It means that you can take a photo, or you can lie down. If you're pregnant and not feeling great, you can lie down. It's somewhere that you can express if you need to. It's just having some spaces. And what I found is not just for our own employees, but we've had meetings where external people have come and asked if there's anywhere that they can express or whatever. So having that would be one of the things that I would think is really useful. Lots of pot plants is good, because when my 3-year-old comes in and I have to take a call, someone will lead around and help. She will water all the plants.
Great.
And she now thinks that that's her job.
I think one other point coming back to the wellness room is having a lock on the door
Yes.
as well. It's really key. Really small, not something you normally think about in an office environment, but a friend had kind of wedges, like door wedges, and she had to carry it around and stick it under the door.
The woman that expressed at our work in a meeting room had a little sign made, so she had sort of like, someone's expressing in here, don't walk in sign. So that, but a lock would have been useful.
So taking this to the other side, what could men do to support new mothers in the office and their partners who have kids?
So my husband cooks dinner every night. He enjoys it. He's better at it than me. I enjoy cooking, but he takes that. So I think, from a family perspective, that's sort of sharing the load. I have other things that I'm responsible for, but that's super helpful.
I think for men who have kids who are in the office, being kind of quite involved and quite present, and also kind of making the commitment to be home for dinner or whatever it is, right? Or doing the pickups, so that it's not just the mums who are leaving early or are taking the days for sick kids. I think we all want men to be kind of more like picking up more of the mental load anyway, but if they made an effort to do that in their work environments, then I think that would help everyone's lives actually, because it would make it clear that everyone's parents. It's not a mum issue, it's a parent issue. So I think that would be really helpful.
I agree with all that, and just the understanding, again, lots of little stories, but with my sick 3-year-old yesterday, earlier calls when I said that I was hiding from her, that was because her siblings were home to look after her at the same time. But earlier in the day when it was just me and her, I had her on the couch and she was just lying there watching my phone, great parenting. And she kept yelling that she wanted chocolate. By the end of the call, 3 of the men offered to bring chocolate round to my house. So it's just, I did not need it. We had chocolate. But, it's just being understanding and not judging, and just, sharing a laugh, and just understanding that I can still do my job with a sick child on the couch. It just might have some strange back noise.
Which I think COVID has been a great example of, the dads have actually had to understand what it's like when you're trying to work from home with a sick child, because they spent 6 weeks at home with their children, and they were also hiding in the wardrobe. So I think that will help understanding as taking that conversation further. Okay, we've got time for probably 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up. So one is, you all sound very accomplished. Could you share about any challenges that you didn't expect in your journey?
Like general career, should we interpret it like that?
Or particularly in terms of of returning to work. So we're obviously quite good at our day jobs, and whether there was anything that we kind of caused a hurdle that we didn't expect as part of our parenting journey, maybe.
So I do have one it's around the return to work, as the sort of comments from my family, like wider family, around that. Don't you just want to stay at home with your child for beyond? I was like,
well-intentioned relatives.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And my answer was like, well, of course I do, but I also want to work, and that's part of my identity. And that's I found that quite a difficult conversation, because I also didn't want. I knew they were coming from their own values perspective. I didn't want to insult them that my priorities were a bit different. I found that was it still doesn't sit well with me. Yeah, and it's not a conversation that's gone away, but I think it is coming from a caring place. The comments, it's thinking about my family holistically. The comments are coming from my holistic family, and but it just doesn't sit right with me. I'm still navigating how I actually respond to that. I typically ignore it, which is maybe not the best approach.
I would reiterate that point I made earlier about kind of accepting why you're at work, and it kind of goes to that point as well, right? Yeah, people around you will kind of reinforce the message, I think, and even in a well-intentioned way, that maybe you should be home, maybe you should have made a home-cooked meal today, or maybe you should have done this. But actually, I've made a deliberate choice about the life that I want to lead, and also the example that I want to set for my kids about having a working mum, and showing that it can be done, and it can be done well, and that they aren't hungry or cold or suffering as a result of me not being there 24 hours a day. But yeah, I think that is that kind of psychological impact of people's expectations of what you should be doing versus what you've chosen to do is, I guess, the trickiest. And I hadn't expected that. I really hadn't expected that.
Yeah, the hurdles, I think it covers a lot. But what I was going to say is probably what I hadn't expected is the change in how I'd feel and the change in values. I have shared with the other panelists, but in my career, I was very career focused, had the children and made it work. But there came a point when my older 2 were both hitting school age, where I made a decision to get a job that was equally challenging, but not traveling so much, because I personally, not through anybody else's, wanted to spend more time with them, wanted to be able to go home each evening. And that was a change where my career is very important and my role is very important, but it was a change in value that I guess surprised me, but it was not driven by anyone else. It was driven by me. And so you will, even if you have very firm ideas at the beginning and for many years, be prepared that some of your ideas might change at different points, and that's okay. It's for you to decide what it looks like.
Yeah, I think we kind of spoke about it being not just one transition back to work, but actually multiple transitions as your kids go through different stages, right? Because it's it's always evolving, and you just have to be flexible enough to evolve with it, really, to make it work.
Great. We actually don't have time for another question. So we're coming up to our 1 hour. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to our panelists. We have covered a very broad range of topics today, and I hope it's been useful to those of you watching. A little bit of admin. So the recording of this webinar will be available on Infrastructure New Zealand's YouTube page. So if you have colleagues or friends who you think might have benefited from some of this discussion, please feel free to share the details. They will come round after the webinar, and you'll be able to pass those on. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you to Tara, who's sitting in the background somewhere helping us manage the tech. And that's it from us today. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.